Sam Cooke rented an entire floor of a hotel in Detroit so his family would have somewhere to stay. He did not announce it. He did not make it a gesture that required acknowledgement. Two boys in the family, Maurice and Eugene, 13 and 11, were too young to get into the nightclub where Sam was performing. Sam found out. He told them to order anything they wanted from room service and put it on his account. Eugene later said they ordered so much food they could barely eat it all. He said it with a laugh, and then he said, "We never forgot that night." Because Sam didn't just think about the people who could get into the show. He thought about the ones who couldn't. Chicago and Detroit were close enough that the news of Sam performing in Detroit traveled through the family, the way news travels through families, not through official announcements, but through phone calls and kitchen table conversations and the specific chain of someone telling someone who told someone else. The aunts came, the cousins came, the childhood friends who had known Sam before he was Sam Cooke, who had known him when he was simply one of Reverend Cooke's children singing gospel on the South Side, made the drive across the state line because this was Sam and you made the drive for Sam. Some of them had never stayed in a hotel. Some of them had children they were bringing along. Some of them did not have enough money to cover a room for the night and were quietly worried about it and had not said so out loud. Maurice was 13 and Eugene was 11. They had come with the family from Chicago, which meant they had made the same drive, sat in the same car, arrived at the same hotel, and then discovered that the nightclub where Sam was performing had an age limit that applied regardless of who your uncle was. They were not going to see the show. Sam found out. He did not apologize for the age limit or explain that there was nothing he could do. He found them in the hotel, the two boys sitting in a room while the adults got ready for the evening, and he told them, "Order anything you want from room service. Put it on my account." And then he went to get ready for his show. The floor Sam had rented was not something he had mentioned to anyone in advance. He had not called ahead and told the family to expect it. He had not made an announcement or sent word through the chain of phone calls and kitchen table conversations that had brought everyone to Detroit in the first place. He had simply arranged it, had called the hotel, had given his name, had made the specific practical decision that the people who were coming to see him perform should not spend any part of that night worrying about where they were going to sleep or how they were going to pay for it. He had made the decision the way he made many such decisions, quietly, without building anything around it that would need to be acknowledged or thanked. This was the way Sam operated when it came to his family. Erik Greene, Sam Cooke's great-nephew, wrote about this in his book about Sam's private life, about the specific texture of who Sam was when the cameras were not on him and the stage lights were off, and he was simply a man among the people he had come from. Greene described a quality of attention that Sam brought to the people around him, the ability to notice what someone needed before they said it, to make the arrangement before the worry became a conversation, to give in a way that did not require the recipient to perform gratitude because the giving had been quiet enough that it arrived not as a gift, but simply as the situation being better than they had expected. Greene wrote that for Sam, no gesture on behalf of his family was too much. This was not a philosophy Sam articulated. It was simply how he moved through the world when the people around him were the people he had come from. The family arrived at the hotel and were told their rooms were ready. Nobody asked who had paid. They understood without asking, the way families understand things that have been true for a long time, that Sam was Sam, that this was what Sam did, that the floor was there because Sam had seen that some of them would need it and had made sure it was there before they had to ask for it. The aunts who had driven from Chicago settled into their rooms. The cousins who had never stayed in a hotel before figured out how the television worked. The childhood friends from the South Side, who had not seen Sam in years, found each other in the corridor and laughed about things that only made sense if you had been there in the specific years that made them funny. The adults dressed for the evening. The aunts compared outfits. The cousins knocked on each other's doors. The childhood friends who had known Sam since before he was Sam Cooke, who had known him when he was simply one of Reverend Cooke's boys, another South Side kid who could sing, laughed at things that required the shared history of the South Side to understand. The energy on that hotel floor was the energy of a family that had been given something, not just the rooms and the evening ahead, but the specific gift of not having to worry, of being taken care of having someone in their midst who had gone somewhere extraordinary and had not forgotten where he came from or who was still there. Downstairs, Sam was getting ready to perform. He was by this point in his career one of the most polished performers in American popular music, had been performing since he was 6 years old, had built his stagecraft across a decade with the Soul Stirrers and another 6 years of pop concerts and television appearances, and the Copa and everything else the career had produced. Getting ready for a show was a practiced routine, comfortable and specific, the particular focused calm of someone who has done this enough times to know exactly what it requires and what it does not. But before he went downstairs, he had found the two boys. Maurice and Eugene were in one of the rooms on the rented floor, the adults having gone to dress and prepare, and the boys having been left in the room in the way that boys are left in rooms when the adults are doing adult things. They were not unhappy. They understood the age limit. They were old enough to understand rules and young enough to feel the particular mild injustice of a rule that applies to you specifically. They were sitting there with the evening in front of them and no particular plan for it when Sam knocked on the door. He did not stay long. He was a man with a show to get to, but he took the time to find them before he went, which was the thing that Maurice and Eugene would both remember, that Sam had thought to find them, that among everything that needed to happen before a concert, he had made space for the two boys who weren't going to see it. He told them, "Order anything you want from room service, put it on my account." He said it simply, without ceremony. And then he left. The boys looked at each other. They looked at the telephone on the nightstand, the specific cream-colored telephone of a hotel room in the early 1960s, sitting in its cradle with the small card beside it that listed the numbers to dial for different services. They had never used room service before. This was not a thing that happened in the lives they lived in Chicago, the specific luxury of a telephone that you picked up and described what you wanted and had it arrive at your door on a cart covered with a white cloth 30 minutes later, delivered by a man in a hotel uniform who was paid to bring food to your room. It was a thing they had heard about. It was a thing they had perhaps seen in a movie. It was not a thing that had previously applied to them. They looked at the menu. It was a proper printed menu, the kind that folded and had the hotel's name on the cover. They opened it. They read it with the specific attention of two boys who have been told they can have anything and are taking that instruction seriously. They ordered pizza. They ordered hamburgers. They ordered a dessert before they had finished discussing the main course, because the desserts were on the same page and looked too good to leave for later. They ordered things they had never tried before, because the menu described them in a way that made them sound worth trying, and Sam had said anything, and they took him at his word. They ordered things twice because they were not sure the first order had been clear. By the time the food began arriving, in stages, on carts, delivered by a man in a uniform who did not appear surprised by the quantity, because hotel room service in 1963 had encountered many things and was not easily surprised, the room was more full of food than either of them had ever personally been responsible for. They ate until they could not eat any more, and then they ate a little more, because the food was still there, and it seemed wasteful to stop. Eugene said, years later, that they had nearly made themselves sick. He said it the way you say things that were excessive and wonderful in equal measure, with the laugh of someone whose body still remembered the specific feeling of having had too much of something good. They had not seen the show, they had not heard Sam sing, but they had spent an evening in a hotel room with room service for the first time in their lives, with their uncle's name on the account and the whole menu available to them, and the night had been theirs in a way that neither of them would have predicted when they had found out they couldn't get into the nightclub. Downstairs, Sam was performing. Upstairs, the two boys who couldn't get into the show were having the best night of their young lives in a hotel room full of more food than they could finish. Neither of them forgot it. Erik Greene wrote about this story in his book because it captured something about Sam that the official record of Sam's life, the charts, the concerts, the business deals, the civil rights work, the career that produced 30 top 40 hits in 7 years, did not fully capture. The story was not about Sam's talent. It was not about his commercial success or his business acumen or his place in American music history. It was about a man who, before he went downstairs to perform for a room full of people who had paid to hear him, knocked on a door to find 2 boys who couldn't get in and made sure their night was going to be something. Greene wrote that the story was told in the family for years, not because of its scale, not because it involved dramatic gestures or large sums of money or anything that would appear in a newspaper, but because of its specificity. Because Sam had found the boys before he went downstairs. Because he had noticed that they existed and that the evening was going to be different for them than it was for everyone else on that floor, and had done something about it in the specific quiet way that Sam did things, without announcement, without requiring acknowledgement, without building it into anything that needed to be thanked. Sam's greatness, Greene wrote, was never just on the stage. It was in the small things, in the floor he rented without announcement, in the boys he found before he went downstairs, in the specific attention he brought to the people who were on the margins of the evening rather than at its center. Nobody needed to be left out. That was the principle. Nobody, not even the 11-year-old who was too young for the nightclub, was going to feel like they didn't belong to the night. Sam went back upstairs after the show. The family was still there, still on the rented floor, still together, the energy of a family that has shared something settling into the specific warmth of a late evening. He moved through the rooms the way he always moved through family gatherings, with ease, with the specific quality of someone who was genuinely glad to be there, who had not left the South Side so far behind that coming back to the people from it felt like a different life. He talked to the aunts, he laughed with the cousins. He found Maurice and Eugene at some point in the evening and asked them how the room service was. Eugene told him everything they had ordered. Sam listened. He laughed. That was the whole story. That was all of it. A floor of hotel rooms and 2 boys with room service and a man who had thought to find them before he went downstairs. No announcement, no ceremony. No moment that required anyone to say thank you in a way that acknowledged what had been done. Just the floor, and the boys, and the food, and Sam asking Eugene about the room service afterward and laughing at the answer. Maurice and Eugene never forgot it. Their families never forgot it. Erik Greene made sure it was written down. Because the biggest stages Sam Cooke ever played were not the ones with spotlights. They were the hotel corridors and the kitchen tables and the rooms where the people who knew him before he was famous were simply glad he had not forgotten them, and he never did, not once, not in all the years between the South Side and the red Ferrari and the 30 top 40 hits and the RCA contract and everything else that the career produced. He never forgot where he came from or who was still there. He rented the floor. He found the boys, he put it on his account, and then he went downstairs and sang. If this story moved you, make sure to subscribe. Every day, we tell the stories behind the music, including the ones that happened in hotel rooms and were remembered for longer than any concert. Hit the like button if you believe that greatness is most visible in the small gestures, the ones nobody planned to remember, but that nobody could forget. And tell us in the comments, did you know that Sam Cooke rented an entire hotel floor for his family in Detroit? Because Erik Greene, Sam's great-nephew, made sure this story wasn't lost. And now you know it too. We'll see you in the next one.